Everyone wants the result: the strong body, the clear mind, the meaningful work, the inner peace, the life that feels deliberately lived rather than accidentally endured. But between wanting and having, there is one thing: discipline. Not the harsh, punishing, white-knuckle version that most people think of when they hear the word. Not deprivation, not self-punishment, not the performance of hardship, but something quieter, something steadier, something that three of the greatest civilizations in human history understood not as a burden, but as the very foundation of a life well lived. Today we explore what discipline really means. Through the Stoics of ancient Greece, through the Bhagavad Gita and Vedic wisdom of ancient India, and through the Confucian and Taoist masters of ancient China. Stay with me, because what these ancient voices discovered about discipline will change how you understand the relationship between who you are today and who you are capable of becoming. Marcus Aurelius woke before dawn every single day of his reign. Not because an emperor had to, because a philosopher chose to. He wrote on the very first page of his private journal, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. What do I have to complain of if I am going to do what I was born for? The things I was brought into the world to do. What I was brought into the world to do." This is the Stoic understanding of discipline, not as self-denial, but as self-alignment. The disciplined life is not the hard life. It is the life aligned with your nature, your values, and your purpose. The undisciplined life, however comfortable it appears, is the life in conflict with itself. Epictetus taught that freedom and discipline are inseparable. He said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." This was not abstract philosophy for Epictetus. He was a slave. His body was owned by another man. And yet he understood something his master never grasped: that the only freedom worth having is the freedom of the disciplined mind. The master of his body was a slave to his passions, his impulses, his need for control. Epictetus, owned by another, was freer than any man in Rome because he had mastered himself. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius, "It is not that I am brave, it is that I know what matters, and knowing what matters makes every choice simple." Discipline is not about forcing yourself to do what you do not want to do. The Stoic teaching is more radical. Discipline is the practice of wanting what is worth wanting, of training the mind to desire what is genuinely good rather than what is merely immediately pleasant. When you want the right things, discipline is not effort. It is simply living in alignment with what you already value. The Bhagavad Gita opens a window into the disciplined mind through one of its most precise and demanding teachings. Krishna says to Arjuna, "Let a man lift himself by himself. Let him not degrade himself, for the self is the friend of the self, and the self is the enemy of the self. The self is the friend of the self. The self is the enemy of the self." What does this mean? The undisciplined self, driven by impulse, distraction, the endless pull of the senses, is its own worst enemy. It undermines its own highest intentions. It promises change and delivers comfort. The disciplined self, aligned with Dharma, grounded in consistent practice, becomes its own best friend. It keeps the promises it makes to itself in quiet moments. The Gita calls this Atma Samyama, self-restraint, self-mastery, not the suppression of the self, but its refinement. Like gold refined in fire, not destroyed but purified, the disciplined mind loses nothing of genuine value and gains everything that matters. The yoga tradition, which flows from the same Vedic source as the Gita, understood discipline as tapas, literally heat, the inner fire of sustained practice, not comfort, not ease, but the productive friction of daily commitment to something larger than immediate gratification. Patanjali, the compiler of the Yoga Sutras Hadis, wrote, "From tapas, from sustained disciplined practice, come the destruction of impurities and the perfection of the body and the senses." Impurities here does not mean moral failings alone. It means anything that obscures the clarity of the mind. Distraction, reactivity, habit, the accumulated debris of undisciplined living. Tapas burns it away, not through punishment, but through the sustained warmth of daily conscious practice. Confucius understood discipline as the foundation of civilization itself. Not just personal discipline, though that came first, but the discipline that makes genuine human community possible. He said, "The superior man is Catholic and no partisan. The mean man is partisan and not Catholic." What he meant by this, the disciplined person holds to principle rather than to preference, to what is genuinely right rather than to what is personally convenient. This requires the hardest form of discipline, the discipline of consistency. Not virtue when it is easy, but virtue when it costs something. Confucius himself demonstrated this throughout his life. He spent decades maintaining his ethical standards in the face of rulers who wanted compromise. He chose obscurity over corruption, poverty over moral accommodation. That is discipline in its most demanding form. Not getting out of bed early, but holding to what you know is right, when holding to it costs you something real. Lao Tzu approached discipline from a direction that seems like its opposite, but is actually its completion. He wrote, "Knowing others is intelligence. Knowing yourself is true wisdom. Mastering others is strength. Mastering yourself is true power. Mastering yourself is true power." The Taoist path to self-mastery was not through rigid rules and iron will. It was through wu wei, effortless action. The discipline that has been so deeply internalized that it no longer feels like discipline. The master calligrapher does not think about the position of the brush. The master cook does not think about the angle of the knife. The disciplined sage does not think about whether to act with virtue. Virtue has become his nature. This is the Taoist ideal of discipline, not the daily struggle to be good, but the gradual transformation in which goodness becomes as natural as breathing. Zhuangzi described a man who had practiced his craft for so many years that mastery had become effortless. He said, "I work with my mind and not with my eye. My mind works along without the control of the senses. The mind working along without the control of the senses." That is discipline perfected, not suppression of the self, but its complete alignment. 3 civilizations, 3 understandings of the same fundamental human capacity. Marcus Aurelius woke before dawn and reminded himself, "I have to go to work as a human being, not as an emperor, as a human being, doing what he was brought here to do." The Bhagavad Gita said, "Let a man lift himself by himself." The self that is aligned with Dharma becomes its own best friend. Confucius held to principle when holding to it cost him everything. Lao Tzu watched the master craftsman whose discipline had become indistinguishable from nature. They never met each other. They never read each other's words. And yet, one truth: discipline is not the enemy of freedom. It is freedom's only path. The undisciplined mind is not free. It is the slave of every impulse, every distraction, every fear, every comfortable habit that keeps it exactly where it is. The disciplined mind, aligned with its values, consistent in its practice, faithful to what it knows matters, is the freest thing in the world. Marcus Aurelius called it the inner citadel. The Gita called it Atma Samyama. Lao Tzu called it mastery of the self. One truth, three voices. Discipline is not what stands between you and the life you want. It is the life you want, expressed in daily action. Subscribe to One Truth, Many Voices, where every week we sit with the greatest minds of Greece, India, and China and listen for the wisdom beneath all their words. One truth, many voices, many paths. See you next week.